In a second, more people are joining. I'll jump into the usual fun and games with the housekeeping.
Can't beat a bit of housekeeping.
Could make a joke about wives and housekeeping, but I think that's probably inappropriate, isn't it?
Yes. Let's not start on the back foot.
Okay, we've still got a few people trickling in, so can you just give it 20 seconds or so and then we can make a start. Okay. Flow of people has slowed down there, so brilliant. Well, welcome to everyone that's on. Thank you very much for joining us today for this webinar. I say webinar fairly loosely. It's kind of following on from our previous webinar where we kind of started to adopt a bit of a different format for this, which is probably more of a conversational podcast sort of approach, I suppose. Last time I was sat down in a room with someone, but this time we're going with the remote option, so hopefully that works just as well. All looks good so far. But so to kick us off, I'm Ryan Stevens. I'm one of the directors here at Interface, and I think looking at people that were flashing through the lobby there, I might recognise a few of those names, so it might be a familiar face to some people. Today we're going to run through all about compliance, really, kind of staying compliant is as the title suggests. And I'm not really the expert when it comes to compliance obligations and everything legal. So we have Teresa Dyer from Barber EHS joining us today. So thank you, Teresa, for making the time to join me.
Pleasure.
So Barber, as far as I understand it, is compliance. Well, I do understand it because I've been on there, I use it. Compliance platform providing regulatory intelligence, legislation access, and hands-on consultancy in a nutshell, I suppose. So thanks for joining us. I should say from the outset, just because we're governed by strict impartiality rules, that whilst, as I say, Interface ourselves use Barber and the Barber platform, this is not meant to be a conversation that says Interface says or signposts to any guarantee on compliance with your certification audits through a given provider, i.e. Barber. There are obviously other platforms and ways and means out there, and the standards do not stipulate that you have to use a platform. But as I say, I'm not the expert, so I thought it'd be useful to get an expert in the room, the virtual room, as it were, and run through some questions around compliance and compliance obligations. So did you want to give yourself a brief intro first, Teresa?
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Can I caveat that I'm not going to profess to be an expert? I've just been doing this a long time and talking to clients, and the most important thing is to understand challenges. So I've been doing it. I've been with Barber for over 30 years, so clearly I did start when I was 7, but it's changed a lot. So don't want to profess I'm being the expert. So please, don't anybody, anything I say, this is just feedback, working with people, experience over the years, your challenges and different ideas on how to resolve any issues. So yeah, that's kind of me. I'm sorry, I'm the sales and marketing director. So anybody that comes on the webinars, you're probably bored housekeeping because you're sick to death of me doing that bit. But yeah, sales and marketing director for Barber.
Brilliant. So as I said, we're going to try and keep things fairly sort of relaxed. Sort of a question and answer format to today, where I'll pose some questions to Teresa and we'll run through sort of common challenges when it comes to trying to sort of cut through the legal jargon, as it were, translate the legalese, identifying what an organisation's compliance obligations are, how they might stay updated on any additional or evolving requirements as the legislation changes. And hopefully all of what we discuss will give some good pointers towards meeting the requirements that probably a lot of the attendees have to meet for ISO 14001 and ISO 45001. I didn't want to send anyone asleep to sleep with a webinar just on ISO 14001 and 45001, 6.1.3 and 9.1.2. So I thought more of a conversational piece, peripheral, that people can try and take some nuggets from would be a more interesting and useful experience. If you do have any specific questions as we go, please do pop those into the chat function, and if we've got some time toward the end, we'll try and come to some of those. If we don't, then I'll work on sort of curating some responses to any questions there and get that sent out after today. So Teresa, you've done a lot of work, I think, with your clients, as you say, to ensure that Barbara understands what the challenges companies are facing are, and how they kind of, what challenges they're facing, keeping up to date with the information in sort of legal sphere and staying compliant. So I think you've got a lot of experience, as you say, to sort of couch the answers to today's questions in. So let's jump in. As I said, I'm not going to talk too much. I'm going to try and leave most of the talking to you. That's the beauty of this format for me. So to kick us off very broadly, what would you say are some of the biggest challenges that businesses face in staying on top of legislation and wider compliance obligations?
You know, I think it's the ever-evolving role, Ryan, and most people on the webinar here today will probably relate to the fact that it started off with health and safety. Well, health and safety has grown over the last 30 years anyway, since I've been here, as a all-encompassing, more regulations. And the problem with the regulations is they're also devolved. So there's some for Scotland. Fire is completely different in Scotland as it is in England. Then you've got Wales, then you've got Northern Ireland, then you've got Southern Ireland. And for anybody that deals with international sites, that's a whole new world. And unfortunately, 45,001 and 14,001 evolved from being in the UK to being globally. So I think the ever-evolving landscape has got to be one of the challenges here. And then environment was thrown into the mix. So it's like, great, health and safety people, you've got compliance nailed, we know what you're doing, then let's chuck environment at you. And environment's a whole new ball game, completely different set of regulations, completely different skill set, completely different agency that provides guidance. So, and now we've got that nailed. Now it's like, okay, great, mental health and well-being, and now ESG. And so I think that the better these people do, the more they throw at everybody. So, and then, GDPR, it's just growing. So that aside, with the scope growing, you've also got then the legislation behind it, because each of those disciplines is probably a different website, different piece of legislation. And which websites do you go at? Because I don't know, nobody comes to find you. You've got to go onto the internet.gov is great, but then you've got NetRegs in Scotland, you've got Northern Irish Assembly, you've got DAL in Southern Ireland. So that's 4 just for the UK. HSE is great, but then for environment, it's Environment Agency. So I think there's so much information out there. I think for these professionals, it's the knowing where to start, knowing what's out there, knowing if it's correct, knowing if it's up to date, and you don't know what you don't know. So you can easily go and looking for information that may not be updated, because it's not the agency's responsibility to come and find you. They just add information to the website. So
it's a daunting challenge, I suppose, that you being faced with that plethora of legislation and that could apply to you, and trying to then wade your way through it and finding what all of those different requirements that could apply, and then trying to boil that down to the things that actually apply.
Absolutely. And then once you've got it nailed in England, for anybody that's now got international sites, because obviously 45,000 and 14 are global, now you've got to look at the nuances for France and for Germany, and for so how does that apply? So that's another added pressure for a lot of my clients. So what we've done to try and support is just trying to pull up all of the guidance, the legislation. So loads of good trade associations out there as well. So for anybody that does stop at the HSE or does stop at the Environment Agency, there are some really good government websites that will tell you how to do the job, not just how to comply with the law. So they're quite useful. You've got some really good trade associations, because the HSE will tell you generally, this is what you've got to do to comply with the law, but it's not actually how to do the job. So yeah, and what we've tried to do is we find some really good publishers that will try and support and help people with. So and learning with our clients, you know, what trade associations are good. So lots of information out there. It's just knowing what to use, if that
Yeah.
helps.
Yeah, and I think what we see obviously with a lot of our clients is in an effort to try and bring all that together is that all of that legislation then kind of compiles into usually a legal register of some sort.
Yeah.
So how should companies then begin to kind of make their way through that ocean of legislation and sort of boil it down into a legal register of some sort and trying to compile that as the sort of these are the requirements that apply to me.
No, it's really good. It's a minefield. It's a minefield because it's a whole new world, isn't it? Legal registers weren't a thing 10 years ago. Um, Risk assessments, identify, sort of do your risk assessments as you would normally do, identify processes, map it across, and then map that to the legislation. So I think that's probably the best way to start. And then you get the legislation that will apply to your business. I think a lot of people have already done this. There's gaps. I think sometimes if processes change or legislation changes, you're not sure on the nuances and not missing a piece of legislation sometimes depends on the auditor that you get to audit the legal registers. Some of my clients have stringent auditors, others not quite so stringent. So that's an issue in its own right, isn't it? Who's going to look at it? I think the issue that most people have, it's the keeping up to date with it, because a lot of people have got, you know, identified they've done their risk assessments, they've got the processes, they've mapped out the key piece of legislation, but it's when it changes that's an issue.
Yeah.
Because the change might not always be relevant. The change might have a nuance for Scotland to England, so it's understanding, is that update relevant? And actually, don't forget, team, that we have to then prove to an auditor that even if it wasn't relevant, you knew about it. So you don't actually want to get rid of the old amendments. You need to put them somewhere. So if an auditor comes in and says, "Oh, what about X, Y, Z?" you can say, "Yes, but it's not relevant." So yeah, it's a work of art, legal registers on top of the day job. Um,
Sounds like it.
we are working, yeah, it has evolved a lot. We found working with clients the best way is to start with topics. So once you've done your risk assessments, start with topics. So we've mapped out key topics. And then we will then lead people to legislation by topic. So like first aid, and then by region. So, you know, so we'll map. That might be a really good starting point for people as well,
I
just
guess
by
if you go
topics.
through kind of the process side of things, you only get a lot of the kind of industry specific stuff coming through
Yeah.
from that. But then the sort of the wider sphere around HR related kind of legislation, things like that, might not going to get picked up through that process as easily. But if you kind of then go through each of those as sort of a topic, like you say, that's
Yeah.
that's a way to then sort of bridge that gap and build on that from there.
Yeah, it depends what the scope is. And if people have got HR in their remit as well, they'll have to look at HR topics. I mean, we specialise more in the ESG, health and safety, but there is an overlap, modern slavery, you know, mental health and work. So there are lots of key topics that you just have to keep adding. And I just think it is a beast. It will keep growing.
Ever evolving beast.
It
Yeah, I mean,
ever evolving. Be careful what you volunteer for, people out there. Just say no, no to HR, not doing it.
and I mean, so let's say you get through that process, right,
Yeah.
of kind of going through and mapping it out, and you're identifying all these pieces of legislation within your sort of environmental health and safety efforts that apply to you, and then right now you're left with what, a big list, big register of
Legislation.
compliance, legislation or other compliance obligations. It's important to say as well, I suppose, it's not all legislation. There are other kind of
Yeah.
obligations out there, but you've now got this list, but then it's like, well, that's this 70, 80, hundreds of pages worth of technical kind of legal jargon that, what does it actually mean? What's it actually asking of me? So how do you kind of then cut through all of that and kind of understand the legislation and kind of get to the the two lines that says you need to do X.
Yeah. Do you know what? That wouldn't it be lovely if the legislation said this is what it means to you and these are the changes? And my God knows why they don't do that, honestly. But
Well,
So there isn't.
lawyers get paid by the minute, right?
I know. Honestly, there isn't anything out there that we have found, which is why we started writing our own summaries and we tweaked them because it has evolved. We wrote legislation summaries that would give you an overview of the summaries, but now because of the legal registers, we've we've changed our summaries completely to say who does it apply to, so what region, so that you know it's Scotland, England, Wales, Ireland. What does it mean? What's changed? And when did it come into force? And we found that's really useful. So we have started writing that because, as you said, you don't want to read the whole legislation. We're not lawyers 9 times out of 10. And it doesn't detail the nuances or the updates or what has changed. So we're working very hard with clients to see what is it they want, how can we help them. That format's been really nice. And with the new legal register coming out in January, we're also going to do another summary, which will just really very clearly critique very in an area. This is what the changes are, and then you can delve in further. But other than that, the closest that I've found is sort of guidance, HSE guidance. But again, that's quite an ACOP can be 90 pages, so there isn't a lot of succinct information that will give you clear indication of the changes.
Yeah, no. So there are guidances out there, but it can sort of define it further at times. But again, can be very unwieldy at times to sort of get to that level. And you read through them, and it doesn't really break it down, does it? It doesn't really kind of put it into plain English. It doesn't really give it to you in sort of common speak, as it were.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Which is unfortunate for you, but great for us.
So I guess the kind of following problem to that then is once you've gotten through that, so you've mapped it all out.
Yeah.
You've then gotten through to the level of whittling it all down to the requirements of what this is asking of me. I now know, what I actually have to do to be compliant with the law. And if I don't know, maybe you're a compliance manager in the organisation, or maybe not. It's just one of the hats that you wear. You've gone through that exercise, maybe for ISO compliance, maybe for any other sort of compliance. But now you've got to sort of embed that into the organisation. You've got to kind of get that out there and make sure that the company is compliant with the legislation, which can be quite the task, I imagine. How do you sort of make sure from there? How do you move into ensuring the business works according to the legislation pieces and influence the company to kind of adopt that? I know when it's evolving as well, new things coming through, there's going to be resistance to change. So I think was it start of this year, the changes to legislation around sexual harassment and things like that. You can imagine the old guard maybe in some organizations are going to get their bristles up about that sort of thing. And how do you kind of influence that culture change that might need to happen as legislation evolves and adapts as well? It's a big question, sorry.
No. You've got to start from the top, haven't you? I mean, you've heard this before. I'm not going to say anything new that people don't know. You've got to start from the top. You've got to start from the management team. You've got to start with getting their buy-in. What's the benefits? It's knowing your audience. So as a health and safety compliance manager, the MD, it's what's the benefits to the MD on staying compliant? Why should we put these accreditations in? Now, for the MD, it's quite easy, or directors or high level, if they want to put the accreditations in, quite often it's to win tenders, to be able to supply the bigger corporations with information because they're demanding that they've got ISO at 45,000, 14,000. So what's the buy-in for the business? Typically, as I say, it's return on investment for the people with the money. It's expanding the company, winning tenders and things like that, and proving compliance, which is great, brand awareness, all that sort of business, and having all your pegs in order. But that might not be the right message for the managers that they've got to go and do the work. So perhaps the managers on the lower, it might be, I don't know, getting more support. So I don't know, you'll know your business better than I do, but it's just interpreting that legislation in the way that is going to get your team and your staff's buy-in, and that will change the culture. And then those managers are going to have to then support the people on the ground. And what we've done is we found that the managers, we've written briefings. A lot of my clients do a topic of the month. So they'll do a topic of the month for managers to say, okay, this legislation's changing. Why do you need to spend money on that machine guarding? And rather than saying us as the compliance team, us the health and safety team, the regulations are changing. It's going to cost you 3 or 4 grand to change that equipment. We've got briefings that will tell them that this is why people have been prosecuted. Somebody has gone. So if we get the message right in your communication tools, you'll get a better buy-in, if that makes sense. And then the message to the people on the ground will be different. It will be how to get home safely, because that's important to them. And I think a lot of businesses don't consider which message is going to resonate with which peer types or different levels of the business, if that makes sense. So, and they're not going to read legislation, so you just can't say go and do it. It is, what's the reason? If you give anybody a reason and you work with them and you cascade it and you keep going back to some regular updates, regular reasons why, then the cultures are gradually changing. Did that answer your question, or did I waffle far too long? I'm quite passionate about that, actually.
Gradually change.
Well, do you know what? I've spoken to a lot. Culture's the biggest thing to change, and getting the right message. But I think we are doing a really good job. I think a lot of the guys I've been working with over the years, my clients, we are doing well.
So the big thing there is, like you said, cascading it down and differentiating the message across the different, because saying something to the managing director might just literally be as simple as saying, if you don't do this, we could get a whopping fine.
Yeah.
Fine. I'm not going to do that then.
Yeah.
Whereas when it comes down to the sort of the boots on the ground, it's like, well, I'm not paying that fine. But, if you don't do this way, you could die, is a very different sort of message, right? So it's kind of differentiating that message across and making it pertinent to them in their role and getting that buy-in, so you can get people to kind of buy into it and change that culture over time.
And the problem that we've got is that, a lot of my clients aren't editors. They are health and safety professionals, compliance professionals, environment. It's the writing skills, starting down with a blank piece of paper and thinking, okay, I need to get the message, which is why we were asked to put sort of resources in that you can edit and change for the different levels of the business. So, and it is working well. Sometimes the shorter, you don't want to give them a 100-page document. It's just a snapshot. Know your audience. Yeah. Any of the guys that work with me, they know if second paragraph of an email, I'm not reading it. It's just get whatever I need to do in that first paragraph of that email, because it's just anything longer than that, rubbish. I have to resend it.
So would you say that the kind of the important tools there are it's all around communication?
Absolutely, and return on investment. What's the benefit, and getting the right benefit for the right person.
Yeah. Okay. And then as that compliance manager, with you've nailed it. You've nailed the communication piece. It's all gone out there. You've gone to the right people. How do you then sort of stay on top of making sure that that's been embedded, and what would you say sort of the mechanism there to kind of evaluate that the compliance obligations that you've identified are being met, and kind of evidence? And I mean, as an auditor coming in to do a 14 or 45 audit, I'm going to ask you, how have you evaluated your compliance obligations?
You have to go out and work with the people. You've got to go and see and look and spend time. Okay, so you've got an air conditioning unit. There's legislation. You've got your statement. This is what we're going to do. It is then making the time to go around and do an internal audit before your audit and updating and checking, and it's lots of people just don't get the time anymore to be out on site. So it is challenging. A lot of my clients are using consultants and things like that to help because they're poor on time. So but you have to keep checking. You have to keep, because otherwise, how do you know? You should be anyway, shouldn't you? You should be out on site just checking that the machine guards are where they should be and the fire doors aren't being left over with the fire extinguishers and stuff like that. So once you've got your list of legislation, you've identified how that applies to you, what you've got to do, then you've got to prove that you've done the training, and then have all your pegs in order for your training, your audit trail. You've got to prove your model policies. You've got to keep those up to date. And when legislation changes, you've got to make sure that those are, and that's a nightmare, because, you've got 50 policies, and I know a lot of my clients will spend will put 2 weeks at Christmas, just to update all the policies. So, and you update all the policies, only two needed amending. So, yeah,
Right.
you review 50 to change two. So, what we've done is we've tried to work with clients to put a bookmarking. So if they bookmark one of our model policies, we'll send them an email alert when it changes, and then they'll know which ones they've got to update. But so the more information you can have alongside your compliance to prove that you've reviewed it, evaluated, you've done the training. It's just having the ticks in the box, isn't it? And then obviously if you've done a site checklist, can you upload the site checklist? Can you get managers? And again, that's where the culture, can we empower any of our health and safety committee to go out, and if you can't get out on site, just giving people the skills and the reasons why I need to take that checklist, I need to go and check the warehouse, bring it back and upload it, and then,
Yeah.
keep your pegs in order. It's not over with just the legal register, unfortunately. It is ongoing. It's the updates that
Absolutely.
are always the
Absolutely.
pain.
Yeah, well, like you say there, so there's one of the ways that you're managing that in the Barber platform, bookmarking policies and things like that. So you're kind of getting that notification. I think, like you say, that is one of the biggest challenges. Is you can identify
Updates.
it and all the rest of it, but it's always changing. They're
Yeah,
always tweaking it. They're always changing it, and then again, you've got to go through that whole process again. It takes you back to the start, right? Trying to then, well, what is it? What does it mean? What is it? What have they changed? What applies to me? Because as much as you might get some decent emails from some, I don't know, HSC or somewhere else identifying some of the changes, they're not always going to cover all the changes, are they? It's not going to pull out everything necessarily. So it's kind of like, again, back to the drawing board. Where do I start? What do I have
absolutely.
to go through here? So, and
Absolutely.
other than sort of the bookmarking, is there any other ways that you would recommend that people kind of stay up to date with the changing and evolving side of things?
Well, people aren't suffering from a lack of emails, are they? There's a lack. There's, let me tell you, they probably get inundated. They're probably, Teresa, don't tell me how to keep up to date. I don't want any more emails. There are some. There's HSC Bulletin. And they're all great. It's super. You've got membership organisations. You've got Irish that's super. There are lots and lots of different ways of keeping up to date. The only issue that my clients have is that duplication,
Yeah.
they'll all cover the same prosecutions or this, that, and the other. And then you think, oh, I remember seeing an email from, was it? And then you've got to try and track back as to, was it
Yeah.
HSC? Was it membership? And then was it last month, 2 months ago? So I think what the issues are is just that there is information overload, and it's tracking back and which ones are relevant. So we've tried to solve the issue and try and support clients with just pulling all that information out into one weekly briefing: prosecutions,
Yeah.
case law, consultations, what's coming up. But as I say, that's useful, and you can track back. But the horizon scanning, the Mystic Meg, if anybody remembers Mystic Meg, that's really important for clients at the moment. Keep ahead, look at the future, because it enables you to budget for it. A few of my clients a while back, got caught out because of changes in legislation that affected them, but it didn't come into force instantly, and they forgot about it. And then when they had to make the changes, they didn't have the budget to do it, so they had to go to the CEO and get more money. So I think it's really important for anybody out there just to try and, if something's going to be relevant to you, don't lose track of it in the whole draft stage, the consultation stage. It delays, like 45,001, or was it 45,001 or 14? It stopped. Is it out? Is it out? Is it coming? So just track something. And what we do is we've helped clients now by tracking it with our horizon scanning tool. So what's coming out in the future? If it's draft, bookmark it at draft, and then we will send you an email every time it goes through the next process. So yeah, it's just, don't lose sight of a piece of legislation that's important to you, because it will come and bite you
Yes,
if you
yeah.
lose
I
sight of
suppose
it.
conversely to that as well, though, is the you can be really kind of proactive and keeping on top of that, but then the amount of times that you think something's coming and then it gets pushed back out,
I know, I know,
or they change with their mind, and
I know
I
that.
feel sorry for some clients that I've seen, where they're prepped and ready for a new piece of legislation that's coming in. What was the one I saw not long ago? EUDR changes coming in, then it got pushed out again, sort of thing.
Nothing.
You see
Absolutely.
people's investment, right? And a huge amount of investment of time, and then suddenly it just feels like they've wasted that time. But I suppose usually speaking, it's just delays and it comes through
Well,
eventually. But
they're just tweaking it. Normally, it does hit you at some point when you're least expecting it. So just keep an eye, keep tracking, and keep
stay ahead of
ahead.
the curve.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Better to be forewarned and forearmed, or something like that, isn't it? I don't know. It was
Yeah.
something.
Oh, listen, that was brilliant. Thank you. I think we've tried to keep this nice and short and sharp, just to kind of cover through a broad, high level on sort of staying compliant. So hopefully that was interesting and useful for some people. I just have a look quickly at the chat to see if there's anything we can quickly cover there. Like I say, if you do have any questions, just let us know. I think there's only a couple of minutes we can probably cover those off.
I mean, hopefully that everybody on the call here, that you're not alone. You know, you probably hopefully you can relate to some of the things we've covered, because everybody that I talk to have the same issues. It is just, how do you balance the time, being out on site, up to date with information, the ever evolving topics that you have to deal with, and and the importance of getting it right, because there is a lot of pressure on my clients to actually get it right. If they get it wrong, it's litigation, brand awareness. There could be an accident.
Mm.
It's a really important job. Health and safety, environment, compliance is just so important. Take my hat off to you all for doing it.
So there's one question in there that's kind of multifaceted, quite
Oh,
layered,
I
to
hope
be
it's not
honest,
too tricky. I hope it's not too tricky.
from an
Can I
ether. So
abstain?
say again.
Can I abstain? I'm not the
It's such
expert.
an on, say, compliance review, updates and audits in-house. Do you have to demonstrate competence of your staff? Are there any minimum requirements to comply with ISO? And how can you demonstrate competence? So you kind of geared toward how could you ensure or demonstrate the competence of your staff to implement the kind of legislative changes, which I think is an interesting question.
It's really interesting. And you had a webinar recently where they're asking, the new fire regs are changing, aren't they? And they're saying now you've got to start taking as a fire risk assessor or fire inspector or something. I haven't got the using it right in terminology, but you're going to have to start taking qualifications and exams and that, but they're not coming out yet. So we had so many questions like, oh my God, what exams do I need to take to prove that I'm a competent fire assessor or whatever? And the answer is, well, actually there's nothing yet because it's not out. So they're saying, yeah, you've got to do it. So what I would say is just make sure that you can prove that people have had training, cover your back wherever possible. What's sensible for your business?
Mm.
If you are going to get staff to go and do a risk assessment or to go and evaluate any of your compliance, they need to know what they're evaluating.
Yeah.
So what does that look like? And then for you to then show an order to that, I would imagine there's got to be some sort of training certificate, CPD, a little audit trail where they've signed to say, as long as you've got something that you can prove, then I think,
Yeah, I
don't
think it
know, I don't know
comes
what you think, Ryan. Is that's
comes back to risk, I think, at that point. I think you're looking at the risk level associated with whatever piece of legislation we're talking about. If it's something very
yeah.
simple, then and it's because a lot of legislation, thankfully, comes back to sort of common sense, right? So hopefully, your staff have got a decent bit of that, and then you should be all right. But when it comes to sort of more the industry specific pieces and things like that, like you say, if it's fire regulations requiring certainly a lot of the time the legislation will kind of detail the requirement for competency, so it will be within there. So primarily I think you're looking at ensuring you meet that requirement within the legislation for competence. On a broader level, I think it's a risk-based approach and kind of common sense prevails really. Another question there on any thoughts on integrating with a quality management system? So your environment, health and safety legislation that we're talking about there. Any thoughts on integrating that with a quality management system?
A lot of people are. A lot of people are pulling it all under one management system. It does make sense. I think quality is quite difficult to stream. So we find it difficult to actually put quality in our library because it's quite generalist. So quality will mean lots of different things for lots of different processes. So I think, yeah, lots of clients are looking for a QMS. It does make sense. And to bring it all together under a management system. So if you can, I absolutely would, because it all relates, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I would say obviously within so talking quality management systems, ISO 9001, while it
Yeah.
doesn't stipulate that you need to have a legal register of any kind, I think it's best practice at the end of the day to make sure you're, well, it's more than best practice. You've got to be legally compliant. So, you know, it makes sense that you would keep some form of register, regardless of whether you're only running a quality management system or whether you're running an environmental health and safety management system. You know, you want to be compliant at the end of the day. Quality, I suppose, would probably point maybe more towards some of the more industry specific standards again, so maybe like product specific standards and things like that, that you wouldn't necessarily maybe pick up every time with sort of more an environmental health or health and safety lens. But yeah, I think it's, as you say, it's looking at that kind of business management system, really, isn't it? It's looking at trying to make sure as a business you're ticking all those boxes for all the different topics: environment, health and safety, quality, and just essentially trying to do your best and be a good business.
It's even if you're not doing the accreditations, you know, so a lot of people we speak to, they don't use the term legal registers because they don't need a legal register because they don't have to have it audited. So things like, you know, I don't know, there's lots of different organisations, but it's really good best practice to have a list of legislation anyway that you can prove. So if there's an accident, if there's anything there, you just want to get your pegs in order to prove that you knew what you were doing and prove that you've been doing it to mitigate any risk.
Yeah, brilliant. Right, I think if there are any other questions, we can look at trying to come back to those on email after the fact. I think we've managed to keep it fairly short, succinct, more of a sort of lunch breaky, lengthy sort of session, which is good. Normally when I say that it'll be 30 minutes, it ends up being an hour, so we've done quite well. Thank you so much, Teresa, for your insights. If anyone wants to learn more about Barbour, where can they go?
barberehs.com. I think we haven't got, we didn't put, because this wasn't a sales bit, it was just, so I'm not prepared. I have no slides to promote Barbour. If anybody wants to find us, it's Barbour like the jacket. And we get so many phone calls for Barbour like the jacket. So barberehs.com. Come and speak to us. But yeah, it was more nice to have a chat, and hopefully it's just, you know, you're not alone. Everybody's doing environment, ESG. Don't volunteer, keep running.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for your time, Teresa. It was,
Pleasure.
I think, very insightful and a useful session, hopefully, for those that have attended. I should have said to start, obviously, today was recorded, as you can see on the webinar, and will be made available.
I'm not, no, nothing. No, nothing. Nobody wasn't right.
Will be made available to all clients in their client portals as per usual. So thanks very much for attending. And once again, thank you to Teresa.
Bless you. Thanks, Ryan. Thanks ever so much for having me. Hopefully, good luck, everybody.
Best of luck on your staying compliant.
Yeah.
All the best.
Thanks, Ryan.